Yep.
All right, good afternoon, everyone.
You're good.
Wow, great crowd here. And a really full room. No pressure, Sarah and Phil. So I think some of you were in the previous case study. My name is Nami Hingorani. I'm part of the customer services and success team at MetricStream. And I've been with MetricStream for about 8 years, work with some of you in the room, and hopefully more in the future. So we've had a really good journey with Nationwide Building Society over the last few years, and I'm really excited to have Sarah and Phil join us to talk about their experiences and really talk about some of the implementation best practices and also integrating operational risk with compliance. I won't get into the introductions because I want to save some time for questions later, as I think there will be quite a few questions. Okay. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Harmon and Phil Crook.
All right, well, good to see everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, which if you were in the last session just now is going to bore you for about 30 seconds because I'm going to say more or less the same thing. But the good news is I'm then going to keep quiet and Sarah's going to do loads of the talking because she's got a more interesting story to tell than me. So I'm Phil Crook. I'm the head of compliance advice at Nationwide Building Society. I joined this time last year, having spent 12 years at Lloyds Banking Group in various lines of defence and business and operations roles, and across operational risk and financial risk, and more latterly, as you can see, within compliance. The reason that I'm here really, and I'll talk about this more towards the end, is that at Nationwide we are implementing a regulatory compliance management solution with MetricStream and with Cube, who I know who are also here. And what we're doing is following on the back of some of the work that Sarah's team have done in the past few years. And Sarah will say more, but I'm really pleased to introduce and continue to work with, indeed, one of the leaders in operational risk at Nationwide.
Thank you, Phil. I'm Sarah Harmon. I've worked at Nationwide for 23 years. 12 years in risk management, the first 6 of those in first line in various risk partnering roles, so risk manager for payments, risk manager for financial crime, and then leading some quite large first line risk partnering teams in the first line. The last 6 years have been spent in second line playing with frameworks and GRC tools, which I won't go into too much detail about because we'll cover it as we go through the slides. So as you'll see up there on the slide, when I started the journey for GRC implementation, we were working with a previously implemented tool which was totally inflexible. It couldn't be worked. It was overly customized. It was quite close to an EUC in terms of how it was used. The users, there wasn't great user adoption, therefore we didn't get the risk reporting that we needed. So I was brought in to kind of try and make that work, make that system work. But within about 6 months of trying to make the system work, it was very clear where it had been so overly customized, so overly configured, it was just, we couldn't upgrade, and it just meant that actually we had to scrap it and start afresh, and that's where MetricStream came in, and we wanted all those good things that it says on the slide there, and I'm pleased to say that we definitely have that. We implemented 2.5 years ago, a week before lockdown. So it was really good actually because it enabled us to do all that training face-to-face, and we had drop-in sessions before, and then all of a sudden we had to adapt to more a virtual world and training videos and all those kind of things that we rapidly needed to change to make sure that our journey of implementation soon went into a journey of embedding and single source of the truth. So I'll touch on a couple of these, conscious of time. Out of the box is what I'm really, really passionate about. I think going from what we had before and knowing the difficulties that led to, we were absolutely adamant we had to stay to out of the box. And as a result, not many people believe me, but it's the gospel truth that we had no requirements workshops. I simply would not allow a group of people to sit around and start designing a tool that was already leading industry best practice. We did the exact opposite of that, and we sat in a room, we watched MetricStream, and we adapted our processes to fit it almost entirely. I was on, not this stage, but another summit, where I said about 2.5 years ago, or three years ago, there would be 0 customizations on that tool. And I almost stuck to it, but the only customizations we have is upload templates. So actually, the user interface and everything about that tool has 0 customizations. And I was told that was impossible, and I knew I would have felt like I failed if we ended up with that. So we have configured the tool, and there were various elements that you do have to configure. You're not just going to be able to lift and drop it, but we stayed as close to out of the box as possible, and that was absolutely vital to the success of implementation, despite, and I'm not going to say it was easy, there were so many stones thrown in terms of, but we need this, your tool won't work if we don't do this. And I kind of had an analogy, which was, we are building a vanilla sponge cake that is the fundamentals of risk management. Anything else is sprinkles or icing, and it's not going on. And it was quite funny as we went through the journey, because people would come to me and they'd say, oh, we need this on the tool, and I'd be sprinkle. And I kind of got known for that, and they'd say, oh, can we speak to Sarah about adding, I don't know, a tick box for this or a tick box for that, which in reality is not going to do anything other than people not knowing why they're ticking the box. And they said, don't bother, she'll say it's a sprinkle. It's just not going on, and it's true. But yes, so out of the box, very passionate about, almost as much as I am business readiness. So business readiness was, without a doubt, 80% of the work my team did on implementation. The technical side, we had to do a lot of work on that. But 80%, which started before we even got funding, which was talking to the executive teams about what they were going to get out of it. We had not risk champions. We had metric stream champions, which we bribed with branded coffee cups and books. So they couldn't possibly talk badly about the tool coming when they've got this branded goods, because it would have been taken off them. So we had metric stream champions, a monthly forum. We did training face-to-face. We did conferences like this where we'd had everyone come and they could ask any questions they liked. We did impact assessments on what it would mean for the risk teams. Because we were adapting the framework to fit the industry-leading system, there was going to be some changes. We weren't going to take initial processes that we already had and said, oh, that's great, let's just do all this configuration, when we could have just built an EUC. And that is a lot harder than it sounds. And I think Phil will probably touch on that when it comes to implementing the next app on, because we've got to be careful with the platform to make sure that we don't make that mistake as well. So, you know, there's a good, healthy challenge between us saying stick to the system as it is, because we've got to upgrade and we won't allow customizations. So they're the really important things. And I will say, absolutely, as it says there, the users were engaged in the change. They were fully prepared. They were motivated by the new system. That's dwindled. I'm not going to say they're all still, got to put my wrists on metric stream. They're definitely not doing that. But it's used, and for anyone who is familiar with BCBS 239, we got it confirmed last week that metric stream is going to be an authoritative data source, which is a huge, huge achievement, because it means that the data in there for risks, controls, and loss events is the authoritative data source for the organisation, and the only information that can be presented to board and that can be presented to the regulator. So there's no siloed teams now that can kind of say, well, I've got this risk report over here and I don't really use metric stream because it doesn't quite do what I want, and people say it's hard to use. That's fine, but it's not getting reported anywhere, so you haven't got a lot of choice. So it is, I would definitely say it's firmly embedded. We still have, I'm not going to say that, you know, everyone thinks it's amazing. They still grumble because the system we had before didn't have a risk management flow, really. There was no inherent, here's my control testing results for my environment, and this gives me my residual picture. It allowed a lot of finger in the air stuff, so it has required a lot more work throughout the entire business with control frameworks, control testing. The system has made that happen, because if they want to get their risk data in there, they have to be testing those controls. They have to be coming up with where that risk position is, and it has to come from somewhere, not finger in the air. So yeah, we still get grumbles, but it's embedded, it's used, it's single source of the truth, it's an authoritative data source, and it's definitely here to stay. And we're adding new apps, which Phil will talk about in a second. So what have the last 2 years looked like? So, creation of the platform change forum, which may sound a bit contradictory because I said we don't configure and it's out of the box, but things change, external environment changes, things change within the society, and I'm not talking customization, that doesn't happen. But we have a dedicated forum that sits with attendees from all lines of defence, 6 weeks, every 6 weeks. And if they want to change, they can bring it to the forum, and it has to be approved by everyone around the table. It can't just be information security on an information security tick box. Okay, but is everyone in the business prepared for that? Because we can't just be adding stuff that it doesn't work. So it goes through a business case, a governance process, a build, then it gets implemented. It's a really, really strict governance process. And we're talking 1 or 2 changes every 8 weeks, something like that. It's not huge. Continued and constant business engagement, they have to have that because they know they have to use it. So that we've got support portals, which I mentioned at the end there, so they can go on, they can pick up training videos, they can pick up user guides, they can look at the framework. So all those good things has really driven that adoption. And like I said earlier, the creation of the videos has meant that, you know, they can just, in a virtual world, they don't need to have these meetings, they don't need to be in a huge environment like this, they can just pick up the videos and then ask my team. So yeah, so, you know, next steps, in the middle there, embedding the what and the how. This is more related to the framework, but the system replicates the framework. So the what and the how, we're really clear in the framework, because I look after the ERMF as well, that we stipulate the what, not the how. So much like when we're implementing the system, we're not going to over-engineer this. We're not going to give guidance for every single risk scenario, loss event scenario you can have. That has to be done by the first line, but first line have to do it consistently as well. So we're very clear that we do the what, and they do the how are we going to embed that? How are we going to have a consistent approach to best practice? They also produce data quality packs off the back of Metric Stream, where they pull out data from the system to ensure rationales are fit for purpose, that technically things are working for them, that they haven't, you know, their risks have been assessed in line with the framework and all that good stuff. I'll let Phil talk about reg change. And yeah, I think that's the main, I think I've covered everything else. So sorry if I've gone really fast. But yeah, we consider it, to wrap my bit up, we consider it a huge success. I am not going to say it was easy. There was real tears a lot of times where we just didn't think it was going to happen. But to say it's embedded, we're 2.5 years in, it's a single source of the truth, no risk data can come from anywhere else. If that's not a success, then I don't know what is really. Well, the Reg Change App, I think. Well, I'll hand over to Phil. Thank you.
I'll try and follow that bit. Okay, so I mentioned earlier where my responsibilities lie in regulatory compliance. And so what we've got at Nationwide, like I suspect with all the firms here, and particularly across mature financial services organisations, is that desire to sort of never stop trying to move forward. And so whilst our regulatory compliance space is, touch wood, pretty secure, it is very manual. We're reliant on a lot of EUCs, of knitting our spreadsheets together. We are ultimately, and we still will be, reliant on the expertise and the capability of our people, but without the technology to back that up. Now, as I say, whilst nothing is broken, what Sarah's team have achieved for Nationwide is it's built an advocacy around what can be done when you use your imagination around the use of technology within risk services. And let's face it, risk services isn't always the first part of the organisation to get investment funding. And so the way that we've approached that is on the back of that advocacy that was built, and yeah, I'll be honest, it wasn't just Metric Stream that we spoke to when we were going through that journey about how we wanted to go about this. As Sarah mentioned, there's been imperfections along the way that we've had to iron out, and we wanted to make sure that we explored across the industry what the sort of art of the possible was for us. After our process, we did indeed go with Metric Stream, and there's a lot of benefits to that. For a start, as you've heard, we've got Sarah and others in her team are significant experts in their field where we can sort of utilise that expertise, but also learn some of the lessons along the way. One of the other great advantages for us is the way that Metric Stream set up is the ability for us to use that kind of modular system to our advantage. So from a systems architecture perspective and the capability of the organisation's IT architecture, we can build this in much more easily than we may have been able to using another supplier. As I say, and the point was made by the gentleman from Nordea earlier, none of this is going to trump what we've got in terms of our people and processes. And as I say, we've got that on a sound footing, we think and hope, at Nationwide. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we go that extra mile as far as technology is concerned. So we're joining up, therefore, across risk disciplines. We bring compliance, conduct, and operational risk much closer together from a technology perspective within the society. I should mention, having touched on it earlier, around the way that we're utilising Cube as well as part of that journey. What that provides us with is all of the systems expertise of MetricStream, along with the regulatory expertise that we know Cube can bring and that are helping us and MetricStream with. And that's helping us work really effectively across NFR to build out a solution that we've been working on in the full year since I've been at Nationwide, and will continue to until we implement within the first quarter of next year. And as I say, the last point that I would emphasise is we've had lessons to learn along the way on this, and we may talk about that a bit more within the Q&A, but it hasn't always been the smoothest of rides, but by the same token, once you get that ball rolling within an organisation, that certainly made it a lot easier for us, and so that's the message that I would close with from there.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Phil. Do we have questions?
Thank you. I'm just wondering how the implementation team was set up. Did you guys use an implementation partner? And if so, would you value that and the role they played?
That's a really good question. So we did. So internally, and I should have touched on it actually, we had a business team. Implementations in the past had focused on heavy technology teams, that because it's technology, right? So we need technology teams and a couple of people side of desk that knew a bit about risk management. I made sure that my team was completely risk focused. So they knew everything about risk management. They'd either worked in the first line, they brought external perspectives, but they knew risk management, and they were therefore able to be the key team that were able to make those decisions in terms of what it should look like. We use KPMG as our implementation partner, and I would, not just because I know they're out there somewhere looking at me, but there you are, hi Manish, but 100%, they were excellent, and they did challenge us as well. They challenged us as we went along, because they knew that we wanted to stick to out of the box, so they challenged us to do that as well. And they brought with them expertise from both MetricStream and also the business, the external risk management landscape. So yes, I would definitely say, and you've used them as well.
Yeah, I was going to say there's
you?
perhaps no stronger form of advocacy than the fact that we have then been using KPMG as part of our implementation as well. So that's a kind of continued thread. And again, when I mentioned about lessons learned and sort of best practice through the cycle of what we've tried to achieve, that has been in part down to the work of KPMG, because they've obviously seen both ends of that journey. So that's worked effectively for us.
What's the sort of lead time from when you start the project to actually opening the product? How many questions of compliance policies able to be used?
Yeah, sure.
Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. I'll do that. So the question's around the lead time for how long the compliance solution that we've got from start to finish will take for Nationwide. So as I say, jumping on the back of something that's already in existence, which I suspect will change the timescales in our favour. We started this work, I would say, in the first half of 2021, and we will launch within the first half of 2023. So that's effectively a 2-year journey, as you can work out. There are various ways, as I say, in which you can speed that up. One is what the level of maturity is already within the organisation. We haven't had to do this, but if you've got to unwind existing technology capability, I would imagine that would complicate factors as well. And then I guess the obvious point, I suppose, is the level of familiarity within the organisation of how you want to make sure you execute that design. So in the previous slot, you will have heard the sort of emphasis on making sure your design principles are kind of sacrosanct, and obviously the tighter that is, the more opportunity you've got to bring that in. And of course, we spent the first year of that in an entirely virtual environment, which I don't think ever speeds these things up.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, actually, it does add complexity when you're adding to the platform where they have to share libraries and taxonomies. So even though it's the right thing to do, and in the short-term loss for long-term gain, it does add time because they're not able to, come up with those taxonomies themselves. But obviously the benefit from that is that the whole organisation are using the same taxonomies, the same control frameworks. So the Reg Compliance Act will link to the controls that can then link to loss events that can then link to risk. They're not two separate apps, which was the main reason for going with it. But it does add complexities and challenge. This virtual chair doesn't represent the fact that there's an issue, but it does, you do have to keep challenging yourself to make sure that those two applications come together to create the one platform view of the world.
One reason to have a tie.
Oh, another one.
Yeah, thank you both. Just quickly picking up on a comment that you said regarding the GRC system being the single source of risk data. Could you elaborate on that? That kind of piqued my interest. Yeah, okay. So from an enterprise risk management framework perspective, which also sits on my team, and I set. So we have impact matrices, I'm sure everyone's aware of. There's certain levels of reporting for both risks, loss events, controls. Anything that is reported in that space, which is then reportable to the regulator and seen as true definition of risk and control, will sit on metric stream. So if the board or if any other risk committee need true risk data, that's where they go. That doesn't mean that there aren't areas where it's totally beneficial, if I think of when I was in payments, to track that lower level detail, because you need to see things when they start to go wrong, and you need to make sure you're doing that. So it's not that we discourage that, but what we're saying is if you've got a true definition of what the society and the industry classes a risk as a loss event, then it should be on metric stream. And we've even gone so far as, control testing, so our first line control testing team will refuse to test any controls that aren't on metric stream. Because if they are critical to the organisation, then they are mitigating a critical risk, and therefore they are on metric stream and the test results go in there. So that's created so much noise, but I think everybody knows it's the right place to get to.
If I may just add very, very quickly on top of that, the reason that's important may be clear to a lot of people in the room already, but yeah, we are not by any stretch the biggest firm here, but needless to say, we're big enough to warrant the attention of our regulators as far as capital requirements are concerned, and that reliance on the effectiveness of our data. So we're the second largest lender in the UK, biggest building society in the world. That attracts a level of attention on the quality of our data, that, to Sarah's point, in emphasising just how rigorous our approach is around that and our usage of that and what that means in terms of our regulatory reporting, it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. I think that's it for questions. Thank you so much, Phil and Sarah. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.